"You have been staring at me for half an hour, your grace," said the paid companion in the gray gown, without looking up from the card table she was tidying. "And it is very poor manners in a host. If you wish me to leave the room, you have only to say so, and I shall go and be dull somewhere else." The Duke of Abingdon had been spoken to like that perhaps 4 times in 19 years, and never by a woman being paid 30 guineas a year to fetch a dowager's shawl. "I was not staring. You were reflected in the window, sir. There are 200 candles behind me and a black knight behind you." She squared the last pack of cards and set it down. "It is the same as a looking-glass, only less flattering to us both." Sylvester Abingdon crossed the room. It was his own long saloon, in his own house, at a ball he had not wanted, and had given only because his aunt had asked it as her 70th birthday gift. And the whole glittering length of it had spent the evening arranging itself carefully out of his way, as rooms had done since he was 25. "Your name?" "Rosamund Teal, companion to Lady Massingberd, who is at present at the far end telling Mrs. Farrow that your mother's obeson has been badly kept." She curtsied, correctly and without hurry. "She will send for me in about 4 minutes to say that she is fatigued and does not mean it." "And what will you do then?" "Fetch her shawl, tell her the night air is very bad, and sit down again." "You do not," he observed, "appear to like your situation." "I like eating, your grace, which it makes possible." She looked at him then, straight on, and her eyes were an unremarkable hazel and entirely unafraid. "You will forgive me. Everyone in this room has been very careful to say nothing to you all evening, and I find that when a whole assembly is being careful, somebody ought to be rude, or the ceiling comes down from the pressure." Somewhere behind them, the musicians finished a country dance and began, after the usual scuffle of chairs, to tune for a waltz. Sylvester had a rule about waltzes. He had a rule about all of it, in fact. He had not stood up with a woman in 3 years, and the county had drawn the obvious conclusion and made a good deal of pleasant conversation out of it. The Iron Duke, they called him, and the Cold Duke, and Mrs. Farrow had once said within his hearing that he had a heart like a strong box with the key thrown down a well. "Miss Teal," he said, "dance with me." She went perfectly still, and for the first time all evening she looked at a loss. "That is a very unkind joke, sir." "It is not a joke." "Then it is worse than a joke, because there are 200 people in this room and 11 of them are unmarried gentlewomen with dowries, and if you take a companion out for a waltz, they will not talk about you." Her chin came up. "They will talk about me, your grace, and they will not be finished by Christmas, and I have to live in this county on 30 guineas. He had not thought of that. It was, he realized, a failure of 38 years standing. He had never once had to think of what a thing cost anybody smaller than himself. "Then I shall ask you plainly," he said, quieter. "There is nobody in this house I can bear to touch and nobody who wishes to touch me, and my aunt is 70 tonight, and has told me that if she does not see me dance once before she dies, she will haunt this saloon out of spite. You are the only person here who has spoken to me as though I were a man rather than a piece of furniture with an income. I am asking a favor. If you refuse it, I shall not hold it against you, and I shall see that Lady Massingberd hears nothing of the matter." Rosamund Teal looked at him for a long moment. "Well," she said, "that was an extremely underhanded speech, and you know it was." "I do." "One dance," she said, and gave him her hand. He heard the room notice. It went through the crowd like wind crossing a field of barley, the turn of heads, the drop of voices, the sudden industry of fans. Lady Massingbird's face, glimpsed over Miss Teal's gray shoulder, was a study he would have paid a portraitist to record. Then the music took them, and he stopped attending to any of it. She danced well, which he had not expected. She danced as though she had learned it properly a long time ago and had not been allowed to for years. And there was a hunger in the way she came into the turn that told him more about the last decade of her life than any amount of conversation. "You have been taught," he said, "by a very expensive man in a very cold room. My father kept 11 horses and a French dancing master and died owing money to both." She turned neatly under his arm. "You may make of that what you like. Everybody does." The saloon swung past, the candles, the crystal, the faces. He drew her a little closer at the corner, because the corner was tight and there were couples pressing, and because he could not help it. "Your Grace," she said, "that is rather close. We are only dancing." "Then stop trembling." Sylvester Abingdon missed his step. It was the first misstep of his adult life, and it very nearly put them both into a pillar. "I beg your pardon," she said instantly, and her hand tightened on his shoulder to steady him, which no one had done since he was a boy. "That was unpardonable of me. I supposed you were angry." "I am not angry." No, her eyes moved over his face with a directness that was worse than any impertinence. "No, you are not, are you?" His right hand was shaking. It had been shaking, faintly, since the moment she put her fingers into it, the way it shook when he must sign his name in front of the bench, or address the tenants, or stand in a church at a christening, while 40 people watched him hold nothing at all. "It began 3 years ago," he heard himself say, "after my brother's boat went over on the Mere. I got him out. He died in the boathouse with my coat under his head, and since that night my hand has not been steady in company, and no physician in London can tell me why, and the whole of this county has decided that a man who will not dance is a man without a heart." The music covered his voice. Nobody heard but her. "It is easier to be thought cold than to be seen shaking. I have not stood up with anyone in 3 years, Miss Teal, because I could not bear to be pitied in front of 200 people." She was quiet for a full turn of the floor. "Then hold my hand tighter," she said. "Nobody can see a tremble in a grip. It is only the loose hands that show." He tightened his grip. The shaking did not stop, but it went where it could not be seen, and they came round the top of the room past his aunt, who had both hands pressed to her mouth and was weeping openly into her lace. "You are very practical," he said unsteadily. "I have been poor for 11 years, Your Grace. It is the same thing." The waltz ended. He bowed. She curtsied. The room applauded the musicians and pretended badly to have been looking elsewhere. And Lady Massingbird came across the floor with her chin held like a prow and said, in a carrying voice, "Rosamond, my shawl." And then the carriage. "I find I am fatigued, and I dislike a ball where the arrangements are irregular." Rosamond Teal went for the shawl without a word. Sylvester watched her go, and thought that he had made the first sound decision of 3 years and the worst one, both in the same 4 minutes. She was dismissed on the Tuesday. He learned it on the Wednesday, from his own housekeeper, who had it from the Massingbird cook, that Miss Teal had been given a fortnight's wages and no character, that Lady Massingbird had used the word forward 11 times in one afternoon, and that the young woman had walked out of the house with 1 box and taken a room at the Bell in Abingdon village while she waited for the northern coach. Sylvester was at the Bell in 40 minutes, and had the presence of mind, on the way, to be ashamed of himself. She was in the inn parlor with a pot of tea she had plainly made last 2 hours, writing a letter. She did not look surprised to see him, and she did not stand. "You have come to apologize," she said, "and I would rather you did not, because I shall cry, and I have made up my mind not to." I have come because I have done you an injury. You have done me a kindness in a place where kindness costs money, which is not the same as an injury, but it looks very like one from the outside. She set down the pen. Sit, Your Grace. You are enormous and this ceiling is low. He sat. The parlor was 10 feet square and smelled of beer and beeswax, and he had never in his life been anywhere he less resembled. Let me be of use to you, he said. I can write you a character that no woman in this county could refuse. I can find you a situation in a house where you will not be asked to fetch shawls for a person who does not deserve to be handed one. Yes. Yes. Yes, you can, and I should be a great fool to refuse a character, and I accept it with thanks. She poured him tea he did not want in a cracked cup. That is the part I can take from you. Now here is the part I cannot. I know what else you came to say, and if you say it today in this room, while I have one box and no situation and a coach ticket north, then for the rest of my life I shall not know whether you asked me because you wanted me or because you were sorry. And neither will you. And neither will anybody else. Sylvester looked at his own right hand on the table. It was perfectly steady, as it always was when there was nobody to see it but her. Then tell me what you require, he said. You are a duke. You are not accustomed to being required things of. Miss Teal, I have been accustomed to nothing since Saturday night. Tell me. She folded her hands. Take the character. Find me the situation, a real one, in a house that wants a companion at real wages, and let me hold it a 12-month so that every soul in the county sees me earning my bread and not receiving it. Her voice was very level. And in a year, if you still wish it, come and ask me in a room full of people. Not at an inn, not in a passage, not by letter, where they can all see. Because when it is done, I will not spend 40 years being the companion who was clever at a waltz, and neither will you spend them being the duke who was taken in. He was a long time answering. A 12-month, he said. A 12-month. And if some sensible man in that house asks you first. For the first time since he had met her, Rosamund Teal looked away. Then he will find, she said, that I am a very poor bargain, Your Grace, because I shall spend the whole of the interview thinking about somebody's hand shaking in a country dance. She went to the Dowager Lady Everard at Priorsfield, 40 miles off, on a character written in the Duke of Abingdon's own hand which said, among other things, that Miss Teal was the only person of his acquaintance who told the truth at a ball. The Dowager, who was 81 and bored, engaged her chiefly for the pleasure of the scandal. He did not write. He sent nothing that could be construed as pursuit, and he was very careful, and it cost him more than 3 years of not dancing had cost him. He danced instead. That was the strangest consequence of the whole business. Having once been seen to shake and not to break, he found the thing lost some of its power. He stood up at the Michaelmas assembly with his aunt, who cried again, at the Hunt ball with a curate's daughter of 19 who was terrified of him for 10 minutes and then talked steadily about spaniels for 40, at Christmas with Mrs. Farrow, who had said the thing about the strongbox and who was so astonished to be asked that she was almost civil. His hand shook every time. Nobody remarked upon it. He gripped harder, as he had been taught. And in the July, at the Everard summer ball at Priorsfield, 40 miles from his own county, and in a room containing 300 strangers, the Duke of Abingdon walked the length of a crowded floor and stopped in front of a woman in a gray gown who was standing behind an 81-year-old dowager's chair with a shawl over her arm. Miss Teal. The room began to go quiet in patches. Your Grace, she had gone very white, you are 40 miles from home. It is the 12th of July, he said. It is a 12-month and 3 days, and the 3 days are the fault of a lame horse, and I have been sitting in an inn at Priorsfield since Thursday waiting for a room with enough people in it." He was aware of every face turned toward them and found, to his considerable interest, that he did not care about a single one. "You told me to ask you where they could all see. So, Miss Rosamund Teal, you have earned your bread for a 12-month in a house that did not need to be told your worth. You have no need of me whatever. Will you marry me?" The Dowager Lady Everard said, "Well, at last," very loudly, into a dead silence. Rosamund's hands were shaking. He saw it, and he understood exactly what it was, and he did the only decent thing available to a man in that position. He took both of them in his own and held them tightly, so that nobody in that room could see. "You are trembling," he said, "for her alone." "Then hold my hands tighter," she said. "It is only the loose ones that show." And then, in a voice that carried to the end of the room because she had never in her life been careful, "Yes, your grace, yes." They were married in the September in the little church at Abingdon village, and the Duchess of Abingdon wore, at her own insistence, gray silk. Because, she said, she had been perfectly happy in gray and saw no reason to slander the color. He danced with her at every assembly for 31 years. His hand never entirely stopped its shaking. It came on him at christenings and at the assizes, and once, memorably, when he had to make a speech to 200 tenants. And every time, without a word and without looking, his wife would put her hand into his and close her fingers hard, and the room would see nothing at all but the Duke of Abingdon, calm as a stone, standing beside the woman who had once told him to stop trembling, and had then spent a lifetime making certain that no one else ever noticed he did.